Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Cast Dice, the podcast that explores the great big wild world of tabletop gaming that exists today. It's been said once or twice, mainly on this podcast, that we are in the middle of a gaming renaissance. There are just too many good games that we can spend our hobby time and our hobby dollars on. It can lead to a serious case of not knowing what to play next. And I guess that's the purpose of this podcast. It's to dig into the games that my guests and I enjoy playing, to talk about big industry events, and to talk to the people who create these games. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we had on Hari recently to talk about the bolt action event at Cancon, because that is the big show for bolt action in Australia every year. But it isn't just a bolt action event. As we talked about on that episode, Cancon is a game convention, a big one, Australia's big one. And in the past, way back when and throughout, it has always been an event that brings games to the fore that people want to play. I have played in Warhammer events of both 40K and fantasy events there of well over 100 players. And the big games always get more numbers. And it's sort of a litmus test for a game's popularity on the numbers that it can get for Cancon. Now, I say that as the prelude to this because something pretty amazing has happened at Cancon coming up at the beginning of 2023. It is in January. A game that I love and I played for years and years and years, badly I might add, but I loved, has come back from the dead. And it has come back from the dead in a big, big way. Now, I played in an event for this game a year ago. It was a casual, fun gaming weekend with some friends in a rented house. But at Cancon 2023, we are seeing the return of Warhammer Fantasy Battle. Now, you might say, okay, cool. They're going back to the most recent edition, jump back to 8th edition. But no, it isn't. We're going back to, in my opinion, and again, that's my opinion, and I know that a lot of people disagree with this. It's a hotly contested topic, and we're going to get to that in a second. But they're bringing back my favorite edition of Fantasy Battle, 6th edition. Whew. Now, joining me today are the tournament organizers for the Old World, was it Lives? I almost said Returns, but no, the Old World Lives event at Cancon this year. Man, I want to hear what they have to say because this is going to be epic. Ben and Julian, welcome to Cast Dice.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, Brad. First time caller, long time listener.
What an introduction.
Yeah. We're really excited to be on this, actually, more than anything. I think it's like life goals. We've ticked that one off. We're on Cast Dice. We also, I think at the moment we're beating bolt action, so we're happy about that too. But having said that, if you can't, you might have a problem getting to the Old World Lives. And if so, get along to bolt action. It's a great game.
Yeah. There you go. Now, you guys do definitely both play bolt action, but we are here to talk about something else today. And you just cheekily alluded to that there. You guys are sold out at 46 players at Cancon this year with a waiting list for a game system that has been dead for 15 years?
15.
When did 6th Ed tick over?
Yeah.
I think maybe 7th Ed might have came out in 2006, 2007.
Okay. Yeah, I sometimes some things I've read talk about 2004, but I mean, look, it's in the depths of sort of deepest, darkest history for me. I know I was probably doing other life things at that point. I'm of that vintage that remembers third edition as a young person, but you know, like a lot of people missed 6th edition, and I remember hearing about it, and I remember sort of passing the stores back in the day, and it kind of looked cool, and I thought one day I'll get to do that. And we got an opportunity to do it. So it's been fantastic. So yeah, it hasn't been around. what's fair? I mean, we'll probably talk about why it's happening, why it's got some popularity and some interest. But it's just very exciting to be putting it on at Cancon and filling a gap there for a range of not only just old players in terms of vintage, but also new players who've never played any Warhammer Fantasy Battle rules at all.
Now, I've tried listening to some Age of Sigmar podcasts, and because I love the lore of the Warhammer world, it is some of Games Workshop's best stuff, and they do wonderful literature. You know, some of the books are just fantastic. Some of the authors, amazing. It's why I still read the Horus Heresy books. But it always freaks me out when I listen to an Age of Sigmar content of any kind, and they start talking about Age of Sigmar as Warhammer, because in my mind, they're two very different animals. One, of course, Warhammer Fantasy is the rank and flank game, and Age of Sigmar, let's just leave it isn't. Now, I have played Age of Sigmar. It was fun. However, I think by the amount of content I've done on that game for the show tells you about how much I actually enjoyed it. Guys, how did you get to bringing fantasy, specifically 6th ed, back? Because both of you were 8th ed players. How did you go to running a 6th ed event at Australia's largest game convention?
Well, we were both 8th ed players, but like Ben said, have played earlier editions as well. So personally, I used to play 5th edition and 6th edition, and then took a hiatus from the hobby for like 6 years, and then came back and played 8th. And Ben, you played what, 3rd through to?
Yeah, I played a bit of 3rd to sort of 5th, I think, as a teenager. But yeah, no, I stopped, and then I returned to the game for 8th edition. But yeah, keep going.
I was in terms of like why are we doing 6th edition now? I guess earlier this year, like sort of back January, February type time, I was trying to get games of 8th edition in Canberra and just really struggling to find other players. And a Canberra Facebook group got set up a few months prior for 6th edition, and it kind of just took off a little bit, and just all of a sudden it was just a lot easier to get games of 6th edition than it was of 8th edition. Yeah, so it was a little bit just by accident, really. It's just there was out of the woodwork, come these players.
It's kind of random. Like the thing, I guess the agency bit came from there. A couple of younger men who moved to Canberra from Sydney, who were part of the excellent human beings at the Shire. What's the name of it? Can you remember the name? Shire game. Anyway, yeah, I think we're talking about, Brad. They put on Moab. Yeah. Anyway, a couple of those guys, they'd been playing 6th edition for a while, and a couple of them moved to Canberra and were asking questions about, hey, who wants to play a game? And they were talking about 6, and that, I think, piqued some people's interest that are still around and vaguely on these ancient history Facebook pages, and occasionally looking at what someone was doing. But it's been quite amazing, Brad, because I think partly it's a reaction partly to the COVID situation. For a while, I think a lot of hobbyists found themselves with an opportunity to paint and look at things and look at nostalgia and becoming very nostalgic. And then when the opportunity to actually go and play, a couple of friends came up, I think just quite organically people have chosen game systems that, apparently this one's dead. And I think that's what I'm loving about playing this game, is actually proving that wargaming is not just about playing the latest shiny toy. You can actually go and grab some rules from a long time ago and bring your shiny new toys along and have a really nice, fun time, because some of those rules are fantastic. And 6th edition is, in terms of my view, and I'm not sure what you think, Julian, but I'm probably the most balanced. It's probably also got the most comprehensive sort of fluff thing, which is one of the reasons why people are into it. We've got older guys who were running tournaments back in the dog cons, they were called, in Canberra, back in the ancient world. Of that time period, they had 300 people or something at one of these events in like 2000 or 9. Just huge events for 6th edition back in the day. Some of those well-vintaged, fantastic human beings. We get to play them social games now, and that's really lovely. So, but we've had young guys who've younger people who've never heard of Warhammer. So we've had a couple of randoms come along. And I guess with this one, what's most exciting is we've got people who's coming as far away as Brisbane, Obviously, some people are from New South Wales, but there's Victorians going, which is incredible. And we've got a good, solid little scene in Canberra of people who want to play 6th edition, but they're also open to playing lots of different games. And I think that's what we want to encourage.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've definitely hit the nail on the head there, because the guys that I played with a year ago all picked it up only because one of them had nostalgic memories of reading about it in White Dwarf. And all the other guys were too young to have actually played it in the wild. And they read the rules. And because, as you said, it's a complete rule set in that it's not necessarily dead. It's just all there. You don't have to wait for the next thing. All of it in its entirety, it currently exists out in the world right now. And so a bunch of guys were able to pick up books for cheap on buy, swap, sell before 6th of the Dead became hot again. And then those actually started being expensive. But as you say, it was that nostalgia. And for me, I spent my lockdown painting a G.I. Joe army for bolt action, recreating my childhood. But I also painted a bunch of metal Skaven to match the army that I had a million years ago so I could play with it again. And it's just going back to those things that we loved. We didn't have a competition to paint for. We didn't have any, events to drive the hobby. And for someone like me with attention deficit disorder, I was just leaning into whatever made me feel good. And as the lockdowns were thick and plenty down in Melbourne, that meant to finding the nearest nostalgia kit I could grab any given day. And, it was a lot of fun, but Warhammer was absolutely part of that for me. What a fantastic time to pick it up again, because we have, of course, the elephant in the room. The old world, the game, is coming from Games Workshop. Now, they announced that 2020. I'm trying really hard not to look, because I don't get really excited every couple of months and then put it aside again and be burnt out by the time the game comes out, because that's how my hobby operates. Ooh, a castle, the goldfish and the bowl. You guys have got to be excited about the old world.
Yeah, definitely. Super looking forward to playing it. Like 6th edition to some extent is filling that hole, like while we're waiting. And who knows what it'll be like. I hope it's good. But if it's not, there's 6th edition. And to be honest, Ben and I don't just play 6th edition. Like you said before, we both play bolt action, but we play a variety of games. We also play Warlords of Erewhon, Oathmark. We've just completely finished the Rangers of Shadowdeep campaign.
Oh, brilliant.
So play a variety of games. So absolutely looking forward to the old world, but not like pinning everything on it. So like I hope it's a great game, and I hope it brings the Warhammer community together and creates a big community. But we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I'm the same sort of we're trying to obviously be excited about it, and it will do something for us, I think, as people are mad about war games. I've got a bit of a wait and see. I find every time there's some news, I can't look at the immediately news thing because I don't want to be disappointed, and I'd rather just sort of slow. I'll often look at the latest news thing after I've spoken to some other people and sort of spend some weeks, and then I go, okay, all right, well, let's just wait and see. Because I mean, people who played 8th edition were used to getting very disappointed, and it's amazing that there are whole YouTube channels out there of people still kicking the can down the road about why did GW kill Warhammer Fantasy? And you've covered that extensively with people who are involved in working there and all that disappointment. But I think with that, people who were game players at the time, it was a bit rude playing a game which they basically, all the fluff was telling you that they were going to not just end your supporting a system of rules, but blow up the entire universe for why? You can be cynical. Maybe it was IP, so we can change the name of orcs to something silly, whatever. But I'm a bit of a wait and see. We'll see how it goes. I hope it's good. We'll definitely give it a red hot go. And would be lovely, I think, if it brings in new players, an idea of I'm hoping it's going to be a rank and flank game, and I'm hoping it's going to be something that's going to be accessible is really the key thing. So there are problems with how 8th went and the model count and stuff like that. But we at the same time, we don't want, Hero Hammer. Like, I don't know. Like, there's a lot of speculation on what it'll be like. Let's just wait and see and give it a go. And but it'll be very good when it happens. I think it will be interesting to see how it goes, particularly with the success of PC other games like Total War, Warhammer. Who knows? Who knows? It could wipe out the floor of other game systems, or it just could be a flash in a pan if they don't actually. I think at 8th edition they seem to. It's like movies you're watching where it's like you can tell when the script writers were sacked and the hairdressers and the stylists were put in. That's pretty much what happened to 8th edition. Was they released army books and models, and you go, did they even play test this? Like, they had a policy of not engaging with people who were playing. Or even, if they did, they were just watching, not talking to, and not listening to what they were saying. So hopefully they've learnt from that, I guess, would be our thing. But there are lots of great games out there too. So we're not fanboys, I think, is the key thing we're trying to get across there, is have an open mind and don't just sort of swallow what the latest, craze is. To have an open mind is what I think I'm saying there.
The latest craze is kind of my middle name in gaming, but let's talk about why you're here, because I think our conversation will continue once we get into the event itself. Of course, the event is the Old World Lives, which is the Warhammer Fantasy Battle 6th Ed event at Cancon, January 21st and 22nd, 2023. It is a 2,000 point event. Now, the question is, wait, which edition is this again? Because as I alluded to earlier, people naturally gravitate towards, 7th Ed, 8th Ed, the more recent editions. But I think it's important to take a second to go back in time to talk about 6th Ed. Now, 6th Ed, I did play 4th, I did play 5th, and I played them very badly. But 6th Ed was the first edition that I kind of understood enough to play poorly, but have fun doing it. And it was a wonderful stopping point because it kind of put a plug in 5th, but didn't kill the world. They put out a new edition for 6th and they rebalanced the game, which was huge at the time because it kind of invalidated all the army books going into 6th edition. And they put out a book with the rule set called Ravening Hordes, and it gave you a get-by army list for every army in the game. Now, we've seen them do this multiple times since then, but at the time, this was revolutionary. This is, I believe, maybe it was the same ballpark time that 2nd Ed in 40K went, and then 3rd Ed jumped over, and they went to the much smaller books. Well, Fantasy kept the big books, but they did wipe all the army lists at once and then give you things back, give you a get by list, and then they release the books quickly thereafter. Now, what that meant was 6th Ed was very much contained entity in and of itself, and it had a great run. It ran a lot longer than a lot of other editions of both 40K and Fantasy. And because it was around for so long, it was the first time we saw summer battle campaigns in the form of Storm of Chaos. And there were other attachments and expansions to the game. There was the Lustria campaign. There were all of these additional fluff building, army expanding, world building articles and books that made 6th Ed something special.
Yeah, they did. They had a few campaigns. It was like you mentioned, Storm of Chaos, but they also did the Nemesis Crown, which was like one set in the Empire.
That's right.
Which had some nice rules and sort of maps and things that they released for. And they did the Albion campaign as well.
Right.
Albion was awesome.
Which it had some great, not very balanced, but great sort of fun, sort of fluff scenarios. Like, so they're just great to play at home. Like, it's not the sort of thing you'd put in a tournament, but they're just really good fun.
One of the things that I liked about 6th Ed, and maybe you guys can pipe in with this in a sec on your thoughts, but what made it so special for me was it was a massive tonal change for me. One of my favorite books in 5th Ed was the Realm of Chaos book. I believe that's what it's called. It was the Armies of Chaos. Anyway, I love the art. It was most of it was by MG Mark Gibbons. And I adored like the dark black and white art, big scary, monsters running around, Gribblies, Chaos Warriors, Chaos Marauders. I thought it was fantastic. But then with 6th Ed, it's like they took that to the next level. Stuff we'd basically seen in Mordheim, where the art got really weird and really dark, and they sort of funneled that into 6th edition. And then all of a sudden, everything got like 5 minutes to midnight, but not midnight where, the world's going to end. Just it got real grim. And to me, that is what made Warhammer really tick over. You have those wonderful black and white drawings in all the books, in all the corners, in a way that I just feel like helped define the edition. And sort of going into that element of grim and dark, psychology became a huge game mechanic in that edition. Fear, terror, morale mattered. And man, having played a lot of games with Skaven about 12 months ago, I assure you, my army destroyed my opponents until they got near my guys. And then my entire army fled en masse. I was playing our buddy Pip, and he was getting fairly disheartened because I had annihilated, I think, 2/3 of his army in the first 2 turns of the game. Then he got 1 unit into the middle of my Skaven army, and my entire army ran in every direction. And I don't think I had a single thing left on the board. And he just went, "Wait, is that supposed to happen?" And I went, "Yep." And that's why I play Skaven, because I lose every game, but man, is it fun. Is that what are your loves of 6th edition? Because clearly you had to have had one to bring this event into existence.
For me, like one of the things that you just hit on is the artwork. So there's a few books in particular that I think really nail it. So the Vampire Counts one is just amazing. Has really beautiful artwork in it, and like you said, really grim and maybe like realistic, like the way you might imagine sort of the things to look, not like a miniature. So much more realistic portrayal of the vampires. And the Beasts of Chaos as well also has some really fantastic art in it. So yeah, the artwork. I mean, like I sort of mentioned earlier, like I sort of stumbled into it like by accident. Like I was looking for 8th edition games, but hey, people are playing 6th. But then since picking it back up and then actually getting back into the swing of it, because I used to play it a lot sort of back in the day. Like the psychology, the fact that hitting a unit in the flank or the rear makes a significant impact on the game, like it matters. With 8th edition, it felt like sometimes it really didn't matter. Yeah. Like I used to play Empire and I'd run Pistoliers and things like that, terrible unit. You charge someone in the flank and someone kills 1 Pistolier and all of a sudden you lose your flank attack bonus and you don't negate any of their ranks and things like that. Whereas with 6th edition, it's a lot easier to disrupt the enemy by doing flank attacks and things like that, because 6th edition looks at the unit strength of the units on the board rather than just simple model count. So yeah, it plays a bit differently. It plays faster because you've only got the front rank of units fighting. Models that get killed, they can't fight back until the next turn. So sometimes you're rolling dice for combat. You're only rolling 2-3 dice. The attacker might be rolling 5, and then you're defending. You're rolling 1 or 2. So the game sort of just cracks through at a faster pace. You're not having to pick up 20-30 dice. So yeah, it just plays really nicely. It's quite simple as well.
Yeah, the friction element. A lot of game designers talk about friction in terms of like the idea of the godlike general sort of determining what happens. And what I find enjoyable, and a lot of people who've been gaming for a long time love about war games, good war games, one where there are things that happens that you can't control. So I think the friction angle that's built into 6th edition is you really need to think about how you're deploying your army at the start of the game. And the other bit of it is basically who you're going to charge, because it's the one-hit pony stuff. So, if you don't get the charge off that you want, you could be in a lot of trouble, because receiving a charge, you could find your guys, wiped out or running away. Or sometimes people think, oh, well, it's a little bit like chess. It's like, well, no, it's not, because there's a random element about, are you going to get the drops where you want them to be? Are you going to, there's guessing of distances going on. You do the charge and you're like, well, you're not necessarily guaranteed. Yeah. So there are things like that built into it, and into what is that aspect of the game is quite simple. And I think that's a good game mechanic. I know the magic phase is quite simple, which is good, and it's not over the top. You can become over the top with there are some particular armies that do have some access, and some of it's more thematic than anything. But we'll be neutering the crap out of that, boys, so don't worry about that. We'll make sure it's fun in terms of the magic stuff, but that is also good. I find, other than those aspects of the rules, the mechanics going on there are quite good, quite simple in a way. But people shouldn't be daunted by the huge rule book it comes with. Actually, the core rules are actually quite short. It's just all the fluff. You can then make it as complicated as you want. That 6th edition rule book, when I got it, I was just blown away by just encompassing. You've got siege rules in there. You've got skirmishers rules in there that were the forthcoming. They form the nucleus of the game.
Map campaign rules.
Yeah. Like, was it not Necromunda? What's the Mordheim guys? They're still very big. People are still playing Mordheim, but a lot of that stuff originated out of that 6th edition. Fantastic stuff going on there. The Grim Universe stuff's really cool. I remember sort of rediscovering Gortrek and Felix, and I do remember reading them as a young guy, and that really, though, if you like those novels, playing 6th edition is awesome, because you're getting a real taste for this idea of a sort of foreboding build up for a big showdown, and which is sort of nice and fluff with a game, and you can go and recreate that, which is great. And I guess that up a bit in terms of the whole idea of the old world lives sort of thing, and a big nod there to the Swedish fellas in their podcast out there. Is that it's a huge universe, and you can do whatever you want with it. So you can come up with new ideas as to how, a lot of things are well put together in terms of a universe, but you can go and play your own sort of, what happens here or what might happen there. And there's lots of opportunities for people to do their own narrative games and things like that. So I think it's because it's just, you've already got it all there. The universe is there. It's on a filled in canvas. It doesn't mean you're limited. It means you can actually use your imagination about what things you want to add to it. Just because some people think, oh no, we need a blank canvas. We'll do. You can actually make something a little bit more intricate, if you like. So yeah, that's what I like about the whole 6th thing. I like it more than I ever did 8th, really, which would be sacrilege in some circles. But yeah,
and in game, it's, since coming back to it and playing it for this last 12 months, it's in some ways a lot less forgiving than 8th edition, but in a good way. So terrain really matters. Your units get massively slowed down, so that influences your army design. You really want some skirmishes or something that can actually deal with the terrain on the board, rather than just blasting through it at full speed. And you generally can't get alpha struck by your opponent, because in 8th edition, you could charge in, you could blow through a unit, and then you could reform your unit afterwards.
Oh, I've turned around
and I'm ready to face like a counter charge or whatever. With 6th edition, you charge in, and then if you happen to break your enemy or whatever, you can't reform your unit. And at first, the first couple of games I played, I was like, I really don't like this. Like, my units are out of position. Yeah. But then playing more games, I was like, this is actually a great thing for the opponent to respond to me. So, like, do I want that charge? Do I want to kill that unit? But then I'm leaving my own unit exposed. And that's a good thing for the game.
Yeah.
Like, rather than, thinking of it as a bad thing, it's, well, you have more decisions to make. You need to make trades with your opponent in terms of your units. So it's less forgiving, but it makes you think a bit more than 8th edition, I think.
Also, the running away stuff, the psychology stuff you were mentioning before, Brad, like the 8th had this whole thing about, the magic. You'd always end up with an army that had leadership 10. Someone had that, and you're going to get a bit. You got to re-roll every sort of failed psychology test. Like you got 2 goes at it. So 6th, you don't get that, and a lot of armies are sort of struggling at 2,000 points to have a leadership higher than 8 or 9. So, a 9 or 8, you're going to fail. So you have to actually sort of factor in at some point you're going to get a bad roll, and what are you going to do? So those things are all part of that friction element I'm talking about. That you, God is, having a beer. You actually have to rely on your own wits, on what your army is going to do, which I think lends itself to you work for it and you get to enjoy that, as opposed to a lazy war game where you just move your stuff forward and you throw your dice, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not what I'm interested. I don't know. Like a lot of gamers who are enjoying it, is there are a few key things in the mechanic to sort of think about that gets you thinking, and thinking in a creative way about you during the game.
Yeah, but as you say, it's not too hard to pick up as well. It's a wonderful game in that it does have the elements that you can pick it up quickly and push some things around and have a good game. But it definitely has that tactical depth because it's unforgiving in a lot of ways, particularly around psychology and which way your units are pointing. It requires a lot of thought. And I also really you guys hit so many of my talking points just then, but going back to what you were saying about magic, magic is important, but it isn't game breaking. And no one ever accused 6th Ed of having the worst spells ever. It's going to ruin the game. That was other editions of Warhammer.
There's no dwellers below.
No, exactly. No dwellers below, no purple sun. Oh, maybe there was purple sun. It was definitely something different though. But it meant that you had to think carefully about what you were doing, which, consequences on the tabletop, and that forcing you to think about what you're doing. Otherwise you're going to get punished while you're playing, isn't everyone's cup of tea, but it makes for a rich gaming experience that at least for me, I kept wanting to come back to get to, I'm going to do this again. I'm going to see if I can do it better next time. I'm going to try this again. I'm going to come at it a different way. Maybe I'll reposition my units this way. Maybe I'll lay my army out this way. But of course, then some of the missions would change that, and you would just go, oh, yeah, maybe I won't. But then you have to adapt. And in adapting, you're learning as a general, and you're doing things that, make you a better player. And God, it was just so much fun. I could go back and talk about this edition forever.
We had a little Cancon practice recently, and there's a guy, hello Ken, he plays Orcs and Goblins, and what he did with his deployment, he was randomizing which unit would get deployed. So he went extra level of,
wow,
not knowing where it was going to go. So the Orcs and Goblins stuff, you got animosity, they might, not want to do but he just he won a game.
But then he then started randomizing not just which unit he was going to deploy next, but where along the deployment line. So use a directional dice to say, I'm going to on the left or the right or the center or whatever. And then for the last game, shockingly, he randomized which direction the unit would be facing when he set it up.
He was playing Beastman.
So some would be facing backwards or to the left or the right or forwards. And and then randomly he was playing Beastman in the last game, and he had some ambushes turn up behind him, and his units happened to be facing the right direction and was able to charge into them. It was just outrageous to the luck. But it's hilarious that some you don't have to take the game too seriously if you don't want to.
I do remember a story of and I think this may have been 7th edition or 8th edition, but Dave of War of the old LRDG podcast fame may have been out on the town the night before a big event. I think it was the Sunday morning, so he'd played Saturday, and then we'd gone out Saturday night, and then showed up the next morning a little seedy, and I think I don't want to say maybe his whole army, but I think half of his army were deployed because he'd pulled it out and put them on the trays, but they were facing him. And he didn't because he was still seedy from the night before, that half his army was facing the wrong way because they were in the position that he'd put them in the trays, and he just wasn't paying attention. Because, you just put the units down in trays and then went, I guess for my first turn, I'll turn around. Okay. But something that we should also mention, and I did allude to it earlier, because 6th Ed had the legs that it did and the longevity, it ran for a long time, and there was a lot of expansion to it. But what that meant was you didn't just get additional armies, and there were new armies in 6th ed. I believe that was the first appearance of the Ogre Kingdoms. Maybe I'm making that up.
No,
but
that's
it
right.
was also, I mean, zombie pirates and all sorts of other wacky stuff happened. But there were lists in the back of the books. For those of us who play bolt action, they were very much the theater selectors that we know and love from bolt action, where it forces you to take a narrowed army list that goes in a particular vein and that themes your list. You know, a pestilence Skaven army, for example, where everyone is diseased in one form or another, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then those lists also appeared in campaign books. So you may already have a Skaven army, and then there you get the Lustria book, and all of a sudden you can play it in a whole new way. And it forces you to play certain ways, but in doing so, you're getting to play fun, fluffy armies.
Yep.
And I always loved that about 6th edition, and I wish more games did it. Now, I know we're going to get to this in a second, but it is one of my big questions for your event. Given how many of those existed, and in some cases, there's 2 army books for certain armies in existence for 6th edition, because they would have had one at the beginning of the edition and one at the end. How are you navigating that as far as list-wise, what your expectations are for this event?
Well, our first approach is just to allow everything, but to encourage the players themselves to self-moderate and to encourage that, the event is supposed to be fun, and to think about your opponent when you're designing your list. But we want players to be able to use anything they want. There's no rankings points here. There's not like a super big prize pool or anything like that. All back of the book lists are allowed. All the campaign expansion lists are allowed. White Dwarf articles. We've had a player asking us about, there's a chaos mutation table in a particular White Dwarf, and we were like, never heard of it, but Googled it, free version came up, had a look and said, yep, that looks fine. There's one mutation on here that looks absolutely busted, so maybe just like avoid that one, and otherwise you're good to go. But yeah, we want people to bring, if they have a cool themed army, like an all mounted orcs and goblins army from the Badlands, then cool, bring that. At the last event we ran, someone brought Blood Dragons list from the back of the Vampire Counts book, where you can run the knights in lance formation as if they're Bretonnians. And the army wasn't overpowered. Like there's no reason to restrict certain things just because they're different.
That said, those dodgy Skaven players. But no, not you, Brad, of course.
Hey, I lose every game. I'm just saying.
Yeah. No, I think that the joke is that you will find there's always sadly going to be people coming to it. I mean, it is the thing. It's a competitive event, but we're calling it competitive nostalgia. And there'll be some people who might not have the attitude might be they really want to win. Now, in terms of people who are like that, they might want to win by having the most competitive list. Well, look, we're going to say you can take special characters, you can take whatever, but you're going to have to clear all. If you're going to be thinking of trying to do something pretty wild, you're going to have to get onto us well before the 14th of January, I think, is the deadline we got for lists. We don't want to waste your time, and we certainly don't want our time wasted by people mucking around with stuff who might not even have the miniatures, So if you are doing it, take it seriously. We want your opponent to actually have a fun time. So there's nothing worse than something silly. We will be turning around and telling people like, if you're turning up with something who's got 10 dice and you've got 3 bound items on top of that, well, we're going to be having a really good look at your list. Like, okay, you might be taking an army of high elves with, just a bunch of archer blocks and some spears. That might be okay. Maybe that's all right. But unfortunately, people who do those sort of lists aren't thinking like that. They're like, I'm going to have all the best toy snacks and do the combinations. Like, we've played a lot of games. We've played a lot of 8th competitively. So, let's not waste everyone's time. Just to have the attitude of like, bring the cool stuff you want to play, and have the right attitude of wanting to have a good, fun game of a fantastic game system, which I'm not sure how long people continue playing it, really. I'm hoping that people will continue to pick it up. But right now is an opportunity at Cancon to actually get behind a game which is alive, even though it hasn't been supported by its old company for a very long time. So I guess that's my little thoughts there. We do have some notes in our player pack about how to think about it, but don't be that person, man. You don't want to be that person. You really don't.
Yeah, and like I don't want to squash someone's hobby either.
Yeah.
Like, so we've had some players emailing us questions to say, what about this special character, or what about this one?
Yeah.
And some of them are perfectly fine. Others definitely lean towards being very, very competitive and very, very good. And so our response is to say, well, yeah, you can take it, but maybe think about the rest of your list. So maybe don't take a fully optimized your core choices and things like that. So yeah, I don't want to say, you can't use this model or that you've painted and you really want to use, but just think about your opponent as well. So you've got a really good competitive choice with your special character, who's bringing some sort of amazing army-wide ability. Maybe just have a think about the rest of your army.
Yeah, and there are other things built in there, Brad, with the scenarios are deliberately designed in a way to actually, like, you might think that running some sort of particular Uber list is going to be the one that's going to win you the games. You might find with some of the scenarios that you're going to get, very well could actually lose those games. So it's a range of things. It's scenarios, it's your list. It's also the models you got. Now, if you don't have them painted up and all the rest of it, we're not asking for much. Like you can take unpainted, you're just not getting any points. That's all.
Right. Prizes.
And you're not going to get any
points, but yeah,
that's fine.
Just not eligible for prizes.
Yeah, so don't game the model to try to win the game. Like it's just people are going to be taking it really seriously. I've seen some beautiful models that guys have said to me that they haven't taken out of their their wardrobes or whatever for like 15 years. Like, and that's going to be wonderful. That's going to be wonderful to be. But then we've also got lovely new people who have played other game systems who've like there's a great bloke who turned up to one recently. He bought all the demon stuff from scratch. You're still able to get all the old demon models are still what's put out with that name of that game we're not going to mention. Well, I'm not. But you can get that and you can play 6th edition, and that's great. So, think about it's an all-encompassing thing for how you're gonna do it.
Now, I do want to touch on some of the things you guys said, but I do want to jump back a step, and I want to talk about the event itself. Now, you've mentioned that it's almost casually competitive, that you will be resubmitting lists if it's not in the flavor or in the vein of what your expectations are for this event, which is for people to socialize and have a good time. I think it's more of up.
It's more of just a list would create like a negative experience for their opponent. Exactly. That's what we're aiming to.
Well, I think what you put for what you need in the player pack as sort of the key for me for this, which is a good attitude and a 2,000 point army from any of the Warhammer Fantasy army lists. I think that really does sum it up. And I think what also sums it up is you guys are running something a little different. Now, you guys and I both played Cancon over the years for Fantasy Battle, and Fantasy was famous at Cancon for being an 8-game, 3-day event. And I thought that was the hardest wargaming thing I'd ever done. In fact, I have slept under a table at a Cancon between rounds before. However, then I started playing bolt action for 2-day events and my brain melted. But Cancon is usually the slog. What I really like what you guys are doing is that it's 4 games, 2 days. So you're playing 2 games per day. You're encouraging people to socialize. You're encouraging people to take the time to pick their favorite painted army and to look around the field. You're encouraging people to take time, go out, have lunch, hang out, look around Cancon, go to the buy swap sale, it's a community building event. It's not as you said before, this isn't for ranking points. That's really important. And I think it's also important to point out that you guys initially started with a 20-player cap, and you're at 46 with a waiting list now. Clearly, what you're putting out is appealing to the community. That's awesome.
Yeah, 2 games per day, that's just like what Ben and I always want from an event. And I've literally never been to an event except our own events where that happens. So whatever I'm playing, Warhammer back in the day, or I've played Kings of War in recent years as well, and Bolt Action. Whenever it gets to game 3, I always say to my opponent, draw and go for a beer. And occasionally people accept, sometimes they don't, and you play out the 3rd game. But mentally, that's just I love playing 2 games. That's enough for me, and then I'm happy just to go for a beer with someone and catch up, meet them, or someone I know, and just catch up again. And we trialed the 2-game format twice this year with 2 Canberra events, and both were really well received. People really like it.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. We're pretty blown away, but also I'm quietly not surprised that we've had the take up that we have. There has been an explosion particularly on the various Facebook groups around people playing 6th edition. So it's partly, it is the old world coming. That's part of it. And as we mentioned before, there's a lot of people doing some retro Hammer around there. Some great Facebook pages, like there's old Hammer, and there's and the like. You can check those out. There's some fantastic people still out there modeling and doing some great things with old and new models, and also using different manufacturers as well. That's cool. But what I will say about the format is one of the things that used to drive me nuts is, particularly when we were doing the 8-game Warhammer fantasy tournaments back in the day, it was just silly. People barely had enough time to go to the loo. I remember being so angry actually in one of them because it was a really hot weekend. It was the weekend one of the tournament organisers got heat stroke. It was ridiculously intense. There was an attitude that the really hyper competitive guys really didn't help what was going on. There was, before we had a lot of gaming tournament apps as well, so it was so much pressure on the TAs to get the scores up and get the draw up. It just wasn't fun. And that whole Cancon, I remember actually sort of deliberately, I didn't pull a game, but I basically said to her, look, can we just wrap it up now? Because I wouldn't mind being able to, literally it was like, can I go eat, or can I, I would actually like to go and look around Cancon. And that's the point. Cancon is an amazing event. This will be the first time it's come back after a couple of years of either not being on, or look, the start of this year was terrible for Cancon, unfortunately, because of what was happening with COVID in the world. It looks like this one is going to be the goer. I know from talking to Tim at Canberra Game Society, who host and organise the event, that events will sell out. So don't sit on the fence and think, I'm going to sit back until the end of December to decide when I'm going. You need to get a ticket now, guys, because the fact is they had the record sellout of trading spots that they've ever had. And as of a month ago, they said that they had over 700 odd people that had already registered to play tabletop war games. Okay. Now that's excluding people who are turning up to play role-playing games, your board gaming people. It is a massive event. At its peak, you'll have 6,000 people will come through Cancon itself. There are 3 huge pavilions. If you're playing an event there, you want to go and see some of that. You want to go and buy some nice toys, and you will see people you haven't seen for ages. It's just lovely. Also, it's just lovely that you get that feeling of what is a lovely, vibrant community where people don't really care. They don't care what you do for a job. They don't care about all the sort of crappy things that might happen in people's lives or worlds. It's a wonderful space where people get to go and enjoy and be enthusiastic about their playtime. Yeah, so you get to go play with people. So we want that at Cancon. People will get to do that. You'll get to play your games, have a big break, do what you want for that big break, come back second game. And if you want to play a casual game afterwards, we've got the tables. You can play games after the tables. The venue will be open quite late after that. There's time for that. So
yeah, you probably Ben or I we'll have armies there as to be buy-busters. So but we might have a casual game at the end of the day as well.
Yeah. Plus, I just want to get in the first rush for the secondhand store. So
Yep.
It's
Which
always
is a
crazy,
thing,
isn't it?
especially if you're thinking about playing 6th Ed with 6th Ed models,
Oh, yeah.
which is a shout out to the guy who did the animation at the beginning of this video, Quinn, who's been collecting 6th Ed models for years to play 6th Ed, which is awesome.
Respect.
Now, I love that you guys have talked about, in the player pack, you talk about being competitive nostalgia, I believe is the term you use. And you talk about how it's important that you do play and you play well, but also that you're not playing at the expense of your opponent. I also like that, look, you're allowing, because this is a rank and flank game, and that can take a lot of models. However, it's important to remember 6th Ed uses a lot fewer models than 8th Ed, than Kings of War. It is smaller, more, look, I don't want to say intimate scale, but it is. It is a more, it feels more in the mud, slogging it out with smaller battles. And man, those games just look great on the table. They feel great. Particularly if you've been playing a lot of huge rank and flank games, to have the smaller scale, it doesn't feel as overwhelming. And as such, 6th Ed is actually a very easy army. If you are painting to build an army, it is very achievable to get that done. Particularly in the era of contrast paints and technical paints and all these things, you can actually get a good looking army on the tabletop for 6th Ed pretty damn quickly, especially in the advent of all the wonderful models that are coming out these days. So yes, you are asking people, try and have armies to at least the 3 color minimum. But as you said, you're being loose with things because you just want to build a community and have a good time, which I think is awesome.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, if it's not painted, it's fine. You can come anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's talk about WYSIWYG, because that's always been an element of Warhammer events. Talk to us about what your expectations are, particularly if you're being lenient with the painting. How does WYSIWYG lean into that for your event?
Well, we are allowing proxy miniatures as well from other companies. I guess as long as whatever you're taking reasonably looks like what it's supposed to be. Yeah, I mean, we did have a question about, can I take the example we put in the pack is Chaos Hounds and Chaos Knights. Like, can I take some Chaos Hounds as Chaos Knights? And the answer was, well, no, you can't do that, because Chaos Hounds are another unit in that book. So yeah, I mean, we want it to be, reasonably representative. So I don't know, you might convert some Empire Knights or take a third-party manufacturer to use as Chaos Knights, but yeah, not dogs or birds or whatever. It needs to make sense. And I guess if you're not sure, you can always just email us a photo of it and check.
Yeah, I think the key thing is that unit fillers are meant to assist you with the play, and is the point, as opposed to I'm creating unit fillers that are going to enable me to run the magic army list that I want. We're not, we didn't come down in the last shower. Seriously, like a bit of respect for the people you're going to play is really. I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound aggressive towards the people who are playing.
No,
like,
I'm just laughing at
it's
the
just
analogy.
good to sort of set that expectation up with guys. It's like, man, like just don't muck about. We want to have fun. So trying to think about what is the way that I'm going to get the edge by modeling in a way that's going to is a bit silly. So don't even play with it. Like, take what you got and you can fairly represent what you've actually got in your list. Things like standard bearers and musos, for example, is a classic. Like, if you're paying the points for a standard bearer muso, you need to have the model. Okay, like look, if you're playing a casual game on the weekend, fine. I wouldn't have an issue so much if I knew the person or whatever. It's not a big deal. But in a tournament, like, people have spent a lot of time and energy, and there's a lot of good stuff, a lot of joy that's gone into what they've done to come along, and people have spent a lot of money to come to Canberra to play. So don't muck about with the models you're going to bring. If you're not sure, just get onto it, I guess is the thing there, Brad. Like, that's how we're approaching that. So, we're very open about proxies, and that's cool. Just, Don't be that guy. Again.
Occasionally, unit
Yeah.
fillers can get a bit silly. I do remember playing an 8th edition game at Cancon, where a person had a high elf chariot turned sideways, and that was like the back ranks of their high elf spearmen. So it was a front rank of high elf spearmen, and then a chariot turned sideways, and then I think maybe a rear rank of spearmen. And they're like, "Oh yeah, this is my unit filler," and it's like, "Okay, yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
that looks awesome."
But
Yeah.
it wasn't even like a knocked over chariot. It was just a chariot.
No, it was just literally
Sideways.
a chariot
Yeah.
sideways.
I also saw that.
I'm like, dude, just glue a rock to the base and put 3 spearmen around it. It will look better than that.
Yeah. Oh, look, I mean, look, we sold out so quickly. Within a week, we had 30 players from the tickets. Like, it was nuts. And to get the 46 we got to that within a fortnight or something like that. Was So look, there's people have had a lot of time. They will have a lot of time by the time that January comes along. So for our wonderful players out there, I'm not trying to be really hard on. It's just, you got plenty of time there, guys. Like, just work it out. If you need a hand, like the community here, we're more than happy to lend people models. Like, that's fine. It's, reach out. We'll do it for you. But we need notice, and don't I mean, it's just me showing my age. It's sort of people can overcommit and think they can do a lot. Just write down a little task list and just tick it off slowly, and you'll get there. And then just think about that with your painting or that with your list design, and you'll be fine.
Exactly. Well, let's talk about some of the themes and prizes for this event. Now, obviously, we're going to have a best general award, and we're going to have a podium. But remember, as we said earlier, this is not an uber competitive event. But you also are trying to get people to come out and have a good time. And you have a couple of prizes to encourage other aspects of the hobby as well. You also have a best painted trophy, but you also have something that I've never heard of before, the halfway hero. Can you tell us a little bit about that award?
Yeah, it's my favorite. It was always a bugbear at Canberra events in the Warhammer scene a long time ago. Well, in the gaming scene, you'd see this weird situation where people would go and play, and there'd be some players that worked out very early on that they were going to lose, right? And rather than just play as hard as they could and just give it a big old go, the people who made a calculation, oh cool, I'll get the wooden spoon. I'm literally playing to get the wooden spoon prize, right? Like, they come out going, oh, I could actually get a cash prize to buy my models by being the worst player in the room. This is the halfway hero thing. It's kind of newts that idea, but it's just basically encourage everyone to have a go. So it's the player that comes exactly halfway is going to be the halfway hero. They've had a go, they've had a crack, they've won some, they've lost some. They're here. It's normally they're the unsung heroes and heroines of wargaming, and the people who are the middle of the pack. They've had a go. That's funnily enough, it's often where I wouldn't often end up in tournaments, but that's I think that's the point. I think is we want to encourage people from all sorts of abilities and all the rest of it, because you will, like you found this, Julian, like people who paint incredible armies might not be the best player. It's just the way it goes. People are different.
Yeah. It's and like Ben said, it's just a simple way to stop anyone throwing a game to specifically get the wooden spoon, which doesn't happen all the time, but it has happened.
Yeah, just with sponsorship. Yeah. It's not. Have you had that? Have you come across that one, Brad? People throwing stuff just to get the toys? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's I saw that at Warhammer 40K events back in the day, being like, this one doesn't matter. I'll just, and you just watch them actively try and lose, and you go, this doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel good at all.
Yeah. I mean, that's not fun for the opponent. Yeah. Maybe deploying your models facing the wrong way, like people do, but then not turning them around. No, they're just going to stay here.
I think that was on one of the top tables they did that too, which is why you're like,
that's awkward. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know that when this player pack went live, when you started selling tickets, you guys didn't have sponsorship for the event necessarily ironed out. Since that time, I know we're still a ways away from this event. Do you have any sponsors that you'd like to mention who are going to be supporting you for this event?
Yeah, look, Paint Goblin Studios and Greenskin Games have been incredible towards us. We wrote to a whole bunch of different traders and the like, and Paint Goblin Studios and Greenskin Games have been fantastic. All the players at our tournament will get something, which is awesome, and they are also providing prize support there for people who get one of the unique Snowflake awards. So it's really incredibly fantastic and generous what we've received from Greenskin Games and Paint Goblin Studios, and big hello to them. And we're hoping we'll have some more bites as it goes on. I think probably some of the traders were probably a little bit perplexed by receiving contact from some people saying, "Hey, we're playing a tournament at Cancon," and some of them would have been around going, "What, they're playing 6th edition?"
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Because a lot of traders be like, well, how can this work for us?
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the beauty of 6th edition is actually there are lots of manufacturers and lots of traders, whether it's they mentioned some of the names of different models around. Like, I mean, look, there's War Games Atlantic's got some great fantasy models. Yes, of course, GW still does models that are still from previous editions of Warhammer. There are so many manufacturers out there and lots of excellent traders in Australia that you can go and access their gear.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I think this is just a general thing, Brad. I think with this one, we're actually actively just telling people like, go and check out the other games and the game systems. And the people who are disappointed that they weren't able to secure a ticket, like, please still come to CanCon. It is free, even if you're not playing in a tournament. But if you want to get in a tournament, I'd highly suggest going to CanCon. That last episode of Cast Eyes, I was like, wow, okay, it's almost like they're paying me to go. Like the prize support is so good. I mean, that's just worth turning up. Yeah, football. I was like, no, that's just nuts. Like listening to prize support there, that's enough to be like going, wow, okay, if I wasn't doing that, I'd vaguely be tempted. But that's by the by. But I mean, it's an example of there are some fantastic things going on there, and don't sit on the fence, get behind it. It will be huge. It will be fantastic to see that.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about how people can submit. Now, you did say that this is 48 players. We're sold out. You do have a waiting list. But if you were lucky enough to get a ticket, or if you are trying to get in, how can people submit their lists? Are you looking for a particular format? Because I know for a lot of game systems, we have all sorts of army building programs. And given that this is a quote unquote dead game system, Lord knows what you would use to make it outside of Excel. Maybe I'm showing my age by saying that. But how can people turn in lists? How can people get on the waiting list? How can we get people involved with this event?
So I guess in terms of the lists, my email and Ben's email is in the tournament pack. And yeah, just submitting them by the due date, which is the 14th of January, or submitting them earlier, particularly if you think you're running something particularly strong and you want us to have an early look at it. Yeah, in terms of format, some people say they've been using an army builder. I haven't been able to get one working myself, so I personally either just write them down on old school pen and paper, or if I'm going to a tournament, I type it up and print it out so that my opponent can actually read it. So yeah, we're not asking for a particular format as long as we can read it. That's right. As long as it's legible.
Yeah. I know, look, Army Builder 2.2C is what often some people talk about. So, look, more the techie guys out there might be able to work that one out. But if you go to the 6th edition Facebook page, the big one, in the various files that are available, there is a file there for Army Builder, which some people can get to work, and that's great. I think from memory, Battle Scribe as well does do something as well. You can check that out. But look, it literally is rock, paper, scissors, pencil to work out your lists. You can do that. But yeah, Excel and the like is there. What else was I going to say about that? The other thing in terms of updates and the like, we posted in the Warhammer Fantasy Australia Facebook page, which used to be a big thing back in the day, but it seemed like an obvious one because a lot of people are still on it. So in the events page and for CanCon, we post updates there so people can check that out. And we've also got our own group in Canberra, which people are welcome to join, but it's the Canberra scene, a regional scene really. But it's the Canberra Warhammer Fantasy, the old world. Sorry, what are we calling us? Yeah, the old world of 6th edition plus. You'll find that on the player pack. Player pack is available at Canberra Game Societies. If you go to Tournaments tab and then hit on the tournaments, then you scroll down, you'll find The Old World Lives, Warhammer Fantasy 6, and you can access the PDF for the players pack for people who are interested, who might not even be coming. We'll probably update that and get that out before the event. And we'll also be contacting people. We've already done a couple of welcome emails to participants that, we're getting ready to go, getting excited. So that's the communication there and the like. What else about that? That's what to do to get your lists in. And probably, like we were saying before, if you're going to do something weird and wacky and wonderful, back of the book, compendiums. I mean, I was reading the compendium, the early version of the Bretonian rules looks really hilarious, I thought. But yeah.
I remember those. Those
get it in early.
Well, let's talk about the actual games themselves, because one of the things that I remember from way back in the day is the victory point margin system, where yes, there are scenarios, but then often with those scenarios, what determines the winner is how much of your opponent have you destroyed compared to your own. So, and that gives you the winner and the loser and how many points, and it hence the term 20-0. Then I know someone asked me about the other day when I was mentioning it at a bolt action event. I was like, oh yeah, he 20 zipped him. And the guy said, I have no idea what that means. And I was like, oh, he tabled his opponent. It's because he 20 zipped him. And it was the scoring system from fantasy. And I didn't even realize my brain automatically did that. So you will be using the old scoring system for a lot of the victory conditions for some of your missions. I guess it's one of those systems that is classic. And if you've used it before, I don't know if it's even worth mentioning other than the fact that you're using it. And if you haven't seen it before, it's, I guess it's revolutionary for some players to consider, every point that you destroy in your opponent's army counts towards your victory. And the more you have in yours, the better. And it's always important to remember that if you are able to capture someone's standard, that's an additional victory point. If you, now I can't remember them all because I'm getting addition lag.
Like killing
a general.
A general, right? And the battle standard bearer.
Yeah. Some of the games have capturing table quarters as well.
Yeah, table quarters, and then the scenarios. There's various victory points you can get as bonuses for each one in the scenarios. But yeah, look, we're not intending to open up PTSD on old 8th edition people or expose people to trauma. But I think the beauty of the scoring system, Brad, is it does. We've had a difficult time trying to find a tournament organizing application, and randomly Julian found one that's run by it's a chess one.
Yeah.
And the whole reason why is because around the Warhammer scene was always about playing what they call Swiss
pairings.
Swiss pairings. So this type of scoring 0 to 20 is really quite simple in terms of then being able to work out, who's top dog and who's in the middle. Yeah. So that's how that works. It's pretty nifty.
It really does give you a clear differentiation of play results, which as a TO for a lot of bolt action style events, we often had to add additional victory points to figure out, okay, if this many players win, how do I differentiate the people who won those games from the people who really won versus those who don't? This system allows you to do that really clearly. Yes, it's not without its flaws, but it is very clear who's won by a lot and who hasn't. And that, for Swiss system has always worked really well. Right. So
if we went for a simple win, draw, loss system with 46 players, I don't know the maths, but I don't know if 4 games would actually be enough to have a clear winner.
I think apparently you need 6.
Okay. Yeah. So the 20-0 or 20 zip system, gives us, I guess, more differentiation between the players. And in the event there's a draw, we do record the individual victory points scored as well. So you can separate draws on that basis. And even then, if you had another draw, which would be unlikely, it'll just come down to an old-fashioned dice-off. Nice. Everyone gather around.
Here we
get
go.
down the floor, and let's go.
Too late to on my leave.
Going for the dice off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, as we said, this is a 4-game event, so there's
Yep.
a little bit of leniency as far as time goes. But there will be enough time to complete 6 full turns. However, if you guys do call dice down, game over. Now, something that I want to talk about is your sports expectation, because I know, and we've all been playing classic fantasy events, and some are more fun than others at times. This is clearly, if you read the player pack, you get the very clear understanding that this is the kind of event that I would want to play in. It looks fun. You very clearly say you should be taking the enjoyment of your opponent and yourself into account when you are getting ready for this event. How are you handling sports with that in mind to further encourage people to play in that vein for this event?
I guess just to me, it's actually like normal wargaming etiquette. Like these are things that I do in any game I play, but just I guess clear communication with your opponent. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. If you are measuring something, and if it's close, checking with your opponent before you actually move it. When you roll dice, picking up the misses and leaving the hits, so your opponent has a chance to look at it before you scoop them all up. Just basic things like that, really. Like that's what we want to encourage. And we did make a comment in the pack about overly querying your opponent for rules, because it is a timed event, so you don't have unlimited time, and we don't want people like just asking rules questions simply to slow down a game, that sort of thing. Like I think it's unlikely these sorts of things happen. Like they've happened to me like once or twice in like 25 years of wargaming.
Exactly.
But
Right.
it's like the possibility it might be there. So we put in these sort of comments in the pack just to sort of say, hey, don't do these things. Just keep it fun for your opponent.
I used to work as a bouncer too, Brad. So
Yeah.
no, but jokes aside, I mean, it is a shame that you have to sort of spell out what is etiquette, what is actually the nice way to play, and trying to be open and straight with your opponent. Particularly, look, if you don't know the person you're playing with, it's just, look, if you all know the sort of, we're trying to provide a guide and guidance as to like what is a good, fair way to play in an honourable way, if you like, that both players are going to feel that they'll play the game, roll the dice, and the result is the result. And hopefully you can walk away and say, "Oh, that was a fun experience," even if you lost. So that's ideally what you want. So it is a shame to have to sort of spell out how that's done. But some things people don't, naturally sort of, they learn through experience or having some guidance provided to them about, well, this is what we expect. We expect people to play the game in in a positive way, having a good attitude, and actually, kind of caring about how their opponent is feeling with the game. Because there's nothing worse than being 20 zipped. And there's also, I don't know, like people who thrive, who can be uber competitive. It's also, you can actually find yourself going, well, actually, I'm not enjoying myself. I'm winning games, but so we're trying to sort of, mitigate and guide as best we can with the about how to be a good sport and the like. We're not going to offer a award or anything like that for, I know other tournaments are doing that. We might throw something in for it, but I guess the key thing is if people are clear about what things aren't okay, so the querying, particularly a game like Warhammer is so Warhammer Fantasy is so immersive. And you need to be really across the rules that you have for your, your special rules for your special army. And then you also you need to have a good grasp of the basic rules. So you can really throw someone out if you're going to go keep querying what the special rule is for their army, and someone can get flustered. It's just classic. It's a classic, not a very good sportsperson thing to do. So look, anti-social behaviour won't be tolerated. Neither will Canberra Gaming Society, and I have randomly, had those stories over the years. It doesn't happen very often if people have been booted from Cancon, and I always find that really surprising and weird. For a game that we're about organised play, so we want to play together and have a nice time.
I just want to take a second to read something out of your player pack that I think is really important, and I think more TOs should put in their player pack, which is, if you get frustrated, even though this is a timed event, take 5 minutes, take a breath, come back. remember, winning isn't the point. It's about having an engaging, fun time, even if you're losing. And I mean, that's the whole point, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about 4 games.
When I have a game where
Oh,
I'm doing particularly well against an opponent or something through luck or whatever, I feel bad, and I then legitimately want to do my absolute best to make sure that that person has a good time for the rest of the game. You sort of like, I guess, really up your socializing, and it's not fun to get absolutely hammered. But if your opponent can make you have a good time doing it, then that's great.
You don't want to be Julian's opponent that he played at a Sigma. I mean, sorry, that name of that game, I don't really know. But he tells this great story. When I wrote that, I was like, oh, this is a story Julian had. Playing this game, guy was losing badly, didn't like what was going on. He took 5. Problem was, he said to Julian, comes back, I think we've got to go outside.
Yeah, literally said, let's go outside to settle this.
So,
whoa.
And it was the first indication at that point to Julian that he wasn't happy with the game. So, So look, don't do that.
Yeah,
like
I was
don't do that.
I thought, oh, he's having a laugh.
Yeah. So
and then he was like, no, let's go. And I was like, oh, you're actually being serious.
Yeah. So 4 games, and you just chill out, guys. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We're going to have fun and play and be nice and make friends.
As we say in Australia, it isn't sheep stations. We're here to have a good time, right?
Yep.
Oof. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a good time though. Well, having someone say let's go outside.
It's outrageous. Yeah, it's the only thing that's it's hilarious.
Look, some of the best games of Warhammer I ever played, of both 40K and fantasy, and I played those forever, were the games that I lost my pants and got absolutely destroyed, and yet had the best time laughing and just carrying on. You can do it. It's all about you and your opponent and rolling dice and having a good time. Anyway, speaking of rolling dice and having a good time, let's talk about the missions that people will be playing, because there are 4 very distinct missions for this event. So I'm going to ask you to run through each, just so people can get it in their head, particularly if they haven't seen the player pack, and particularly if, they may not be coming to the event, but they are playing casual games at home. Maybe they can play something like this, and it might encourage them to download your player pack. Now, we don't need to go through line by line of each mission, but let's give the idea for each one. So game 1 is a mission called Outflank. What happens in that mission?
Well, the idea essentially is just to get into your opponent's deployment zone and to give a little buff to the armies that are a little bit slower, like dwarves. Your initial deployment zone is a bit extended beyond what it normally is. And if you can get more units into your opponent's deployment zone than they have in yours, you'll get some bonus victory points at the end. That's essentially it. Part of the strategy of including this mission is just a little bit to discourage gun lines. So
right.
Yeah. So if you take a gun line, you're probably really going to struggle with this scenario.
Yeah. And I think of that gun line, for people who aren't familiar, that's the idea of an army that's got access to war machines or very powerful magical missile options in their list, and sort of bunker down in the deployment zone and don't move, and then expect the other player to sort of come at them, which is not fun at all. And we're actively again, it goes without saying, you don't want to be that guy. And look, if you are going to try to be that guy, you're going to lose game. You're going to lose this game. You're going to lose badly. The other part is, if you kill the enemy's generals, it's worth points in terms of the scenario. So it's get up, have a go, and really try to get to the other end of the table. And I think for me, it was very much inspired by more recent, like playing Bolt Action and playing Warriors of Nowhere or Irwan. They're great sort of, lots of scenarios and things like that are really into that idea of, move around the board is a way to add an element of friction to people's army lists. You can't just have a one-trick pony.
Exactly, right? Because so many of the classic meta of 40 fantasy armies did lean in one direction. But I think it's great that you are encouraging players to think multi-dimensionally with army building, and I think it'll
Yep.
make for more interesting dynamic games as well. So
Yeah,
that's cool.
and then second game's a little bit the same, but it's just an objective game where there's an objective in the center of the board, and the army with the most unit strength around that objective gets bonus victory points at the end. So again, encouraging the armies to move forward. A little bit of a nerf to the gun lines, but it's less punishing than the first scenario because you don't have to get right to the enemy's deployment zone. It's only the center of the board.
It's our version of Kitty Hawk Down. Nod there to the Bold Action guys. Except it's pretty hard to replicate the idea of we could have done it, like I don't know, magic missile or something. A meteor hits the middle of the table or something crap. Like we could have done that, but I think that might have been a little bit. As much as Warhammer Fantasy is, it's all about imagination. That might have been a little bit too much for some of us. So we've kept that simple. So we're going to have a big bung fight around a thingamajig in the middle of the table, and it's in your interest to get your units there. So yeah, that should again get people moving around the board.
I'm sad you guys haven't said the name of that mission because I think it's fantastic. Get the thingy.
Get the thingy.
Yeah, well, if you're playing at home, you put something really nice in the middle of the board. But when you're setting up 23 tables, we may not have 23 nice things to put in the center of every table.
Exactly. Well, let's talk about Mission 3, which has a far more grim name, Blood and Glory.
Yeah, look, we put this one in here. It's the same name of a scenario in 8th edition, which a lot of people liked and other people hated. My personal favorite of this one, this is the one to put on to ensure that people can get potentially a longer lunch, really. But I guess the key thing about it is this, in terms of list building, it forces people to take command units in their, take a command. They're going to need standards as part of it. So the idea is that the army has a fortitude value, which is calculated by how many standards they have, including their battle standards, battle standard bearer, if they've got that, and the general. And basically, if, you need to whittle down the fortitude value of an army down to the breakpoint, which is 2. So a lot of armies will come out with maybe 5, and then if you lose a general, well, that's 2 down. You're left with
so the idea is to encourage the list building to not just take a full army of skirmishers or flyers or something like that. So you need to include some foot sloggers or cavalry or whatever that are carrying a banner about. And if you destroy those units, you can potentially make your opponent's army break. So we had a little practice tournament a few weeks ago in Canberra where a person brought an army that had their general plus 2 standard bearers, and Ben was actually playing this person, and he shot his bolt thrower at the general riding a dragon, killed the general. I think it was turn 1 or 2.
It's turn 2, and
that was it. And then his army broke, and he's attending Cancon. He went, right, well, I need to put some more standards in my army. So it was sort of not. It should influence people's army design a little bit, but it also influences the way you play the game. You might want to protect certain units to prevent them from getting destroyed.
Yeah. So the game could go for 6 turns, or it could end quite quickly, depending on how you play that. So a bit of thought into your list and the like. It's an old favourite scenario of mine, particularly at a tournament because it gives you a break. Yeah. And again, like in terms of how you're going to play that, you're going to try to get into the opponent's face really with that one. So.
Yeah, and then the last game is just a standard pitch battle. No special rules to remember. That's it.
Yeah, get stuck in. Get those table quarters. Cheers and beers.
That's it. It's a nice, easy way to end the weekend, right? A lot of fun. And what your army does. And, just push things around, have a good old battle, and see what comes out of the other side. Well, guys, I'm excited for your event. And I am going to Cancon, but I'm playing another game system. And if you weren't sold out, I would be hard pressed to not be asking to switch at the moment. All the
we put you on a wait list, mate.
This sounds amazing.
We've had some players wanting to switch from Kings of War saying, "Oh, have you got a ticket?" And like, You can go on our waiting
No.
list.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you get for playing Kings of War. No, we didn't say that to him, but no.
Oh,
No, it's a good
fun.
game. It's a good game. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. We encourage all playing of war games. It's great.
Exactly. Well, let's talk about how can people get on that waiting list, I guess is where I'm going with that. And I'm asking for a friend. How can people get on the waiting list for your event?
I guess, either emailing us. Our emails are in the players pack, or just sending us a message on Messenger, Facebook Messenger. Both of our details are in the Old World Lives Facebook event. So if you just shoot us a personal message.
Yeah, or go Warhammer Fantasy Australia events page. Go to that one, and that's got Julian in there, and I think it's got me in there as well. You can direct message us on that for that one. I think we would love to do more, but I think people, we want to get some more prize support lined up. The biggest concern we have is actually making sure that we've got enough table, good mats and good terrain, and there's nothing worse. I can remember an eight game Warhammer Fantasy one where they really had to just drag up the dregs, and it's not nice playing on not very fun terrain. One way around is we'll make sure the top players play on the worst terrain. That's my plan. But we'll see if that happens.
Love it.
But yeah, it's about securing that. And as people don't be aware who've been to Cancon, the local community is absolutely stretched in terms of providing. It's going to be huge. It's going to be amazing. There will be over 1,000 tabletop war gamers, at Cancon next year. So God willing, that will be what will happen. So it's going to be awesome. So with that in mind, look, I'd love to say we're going to have more on, but we have to be really, really, really realistic about ensuring that we're able to support that, plus what's happening with the current. It's like a weird, 3D chess goes on, which Canberra Game Society has to do in terms of which games are being run, how many people are registered, games that haven't been as subscribed or are going really well, they might get some more tickets. It's all that sort of stuff. So there's that. And then there's also, I think if we get over 50 players, like Julie and I are, we've got 4 games, that's going to be a pretty intensive event to be running in anyone's book. So,
just in the last few days, we've had 2 players had to drop out due to personal reasons. So, 2 players off the waiting list will get past those spots. So, if you are keen, I'd encourage you to get on the waiting list.
Yep.
Brilliant. Guys, this sounds really exciting. And, you're hitting me right in the nostalgia. This is brilliant. And I love that you've created this event. I think it's really brave and fun, and clearly it's paying off. I'm hearing that line from Field of Dreams: if you build it, they will come. And hopefully this is inspiring for other TOs out there who might be thinking, I love a game that, isn't being made or played anymore. Doesn't stop people from loving those games.
That's right.
And it's just wonderful to see this event happening.
People should just give it a go. If you like a game, go and try it out, like your local gaming groups. Just give some people a chance to look. I really feel like I want to play these set of rules, and find out who wants to play it, and set aside a weekend and go and do it. I think people get a little bit too narrow sometimes, waiting for the next. There's nothing wrong with waiting for the next toy. That's cool. That's great. That's part of the hobby. But there are awesome rules. Why not go back and play with your old toys, or the toys that you've just not painted? You've got sitting there in the Hall of Shame. Why not? You never finished it. I don't know. I always said, the 40K boys seem to have an awful habit of, someone will go and spend hundreds of dollars on miniatures, and whatever goes on with their game, I don't know. I don't really understand. But all of a sudden, they're then fire selling it unpainted, and put back together. It's like, why don't you just go and play the game? How you and your friends want to play, and have a nice time. And I think that goes to any people playing war games out there. You don't have to play tournaments. You can actually play narrative things together, and just get back to work out the rules in the world that you want to play in, and for that time, I guess is what we'd encourage. And people that can't come to Warhammer Fantasy 6 at Cancon, we'd encourage them to get on to Cancon. It's going to be amazing, and go to Bolt Action.
But also, exactly. Play play what's fun as well. Like you don't need to play just because there's a big community or whatever. Like I've seen some people say, "Oh, how many people play that in Canberra?
Mhm.
You know, is how many did they get at their last tournament? Did they get 20? No, I'm probably not gonna. It's not enough." Whereas, I mean, we play games that are not particularly popular, like Oathmark and Warlords of Erewhon. But to be
Mhm.
honest, you only need a small number of players, and it's you play a dozen games a year, and it's still a great game, and you still have a great time with it. You don't need
I've
a
always
huge.
said all you need is 3 tables and 6 players, and you have a one-day perfect event because you get to play 3 different people on 3 different tables, and everyone, you get a nice little, Swiss idea of, people who are winning, people who aren't,
Yeah.
and it's just a good time. Like you don't need a 10,000 people.
That's right. It actually doesn't make any difference to you personally. You get the same number of games. So
yeah, look, cook some, have a barbecue, have some beverages. I mean, that's great.
Exactly.
Wargaming can be fun, and it's a good way to introduce people that don't play wargaming. Like I've had a lot of fun introducing people to wargaming through Zombicide. Pushing miniatures around the world. That's what we do. So there are lots of ways to do it. So I guess Julie and I guess ethos is about play lots of different games and do try things out and give it a go. And is what we'd say to people elsewhere outside of Canberra or anywhere. It's a wonderful hobby to be part of and to be involved in, and go out and talk about it a lot more. It's a lot more acceptable than it was 20 years or 40 years ago.
Right.
Very normal pastime. It keeps you out of the pub. You get yourself out of no trouble. You're gonna be fine. Who can't but respect a person that sort of highlight is a little bit of intensive painting of little tiny things and moving around the table and throwing. I mean, look, that's awesome. You're not going to get in trouble. It's good. Mental health and all that stuff. It's great.
Exactly. Well, I think that is a nice way to call it a day. Gentlemen, Ben, Julian, thank you so much for coming on today. It has been an absolute pleasure to highlight yet another amazing game system at Australia's Base Game Convention, and one that I love and you clearly love as well. It's just wonderful to hear the passion in your voices and your love of this game, no matter what edition it is. It's just fantastic to have you. Thank you again for coming on.
Thank you so much, Brad, and thank you the Goblin Paint Studios and Greenskin Games for backing Six. And if you're a trader, look, you can look us up as well, man. Like we're not proud.
Exactly.
Thanks for having us, Brad.
Thanks, Brad. And subscribe to Brad's show. We love this show. I listen to it all the time, even if I'm not playing a bolt action that much as I used to. I still do find it very entertaining. So, yes, thank you so much for having us on, Brad. It's been really good.
Thank you, brother. And Ben and I have talked before off air because he did listen to the show. So, folks, if you do have feedback for Cast Dice, please message the Facebook page. I think that's a nice segue. I do love your feedback. I almost said we, but this is just me with a microphone talking about the games that I love with the people who also share the love of those games. Yes, I have gone down a bit of a bolt action rabbit hole this year, but given that we just talked about Xenos Rampant, and obviously now we're talking about Warhammer Fantasy 6th Ed, and there's quite a few other games up the old sleeve, I think it is going to be a really exciting 6 to 12 months coming forward for Cast Dice. Yes, the Ghost Army podcast is back. Yes, Cast Dice will still be doing bolt action outside of that. And yes, the Warlord Games podcast is also happening. A lot of stuff on the Cast Dice podcast network for you to listen to if you would like to listen to this show. I don't say it often, but if you happen to be listening to this and you happen to like the show, please consider going on to your favorite podcatcher and leaving a great review. It really does make a difference. We don't have any weird Patreon for this because I do this to satisfy my own weird attention deficit disorder need to talk about games. But if you enjoy it and you would like other people to find the show, please do that. Ladies and gentlemen, as our buddy Casey always says, when you are playing the games that we know and love, I hope that your dice roll hot. I hope that your beverages are cold. But more than that, we at Cast Dice hope that you are having fun. Stay safe out there, guys. Good night.